Hi, y'all, and welcome to tonight's live stream. Well, right now, the true crime world is waiting on a verdict in the Gerhardt Konig case. Will he be found guilty of attempting to murder his wife, Arielle? Earlier today, I posted a video breaking down 7 most important, in my opinion, pieces of evidence against Gerhardt Konig so you could fully understand the case. When we're done here, definitely go watch that video if you haven't seen it yet. But not yet, because right now the jury has been Yep, we just hit 7 hours, has been deliberating for 7 hours, and still no verdict in the case. And many people are wondering, what does that mean? What's going on? Is this good for the defense? Is it good for the prosecution? So we are going to break it down tonight. We are going to talk about that. And who knows, maybe they will come back while we are live. We will see if that happens or not. So super quick summary for you of the case. Gerhardt Konig is a Hawaiian anesthesiologist. His wife, Arielle, a nuclear scientist. And she says that he took her on a birthday hike and tried to throw her off a cliff. Then he tried to inject her with a syringe, maybe full of anesthesia medication. There's no evidence. The syringe wasn't found. And then he bashed her in the head with a rock. And only because 2 nurses were coming up the trail at the time and they heard her screaming for help, they came up, they helped her escape back down the mountain. Later, according to the prosecution, Gerhardt confessed to his teenage son. Now, here's what Gerhardt Konig says. He says he took out $1.5 million in life insurance on his own life for Arielle. Meanwhile, she was having an affair and lying about it. She attacked him. She tried to push him off a cliff and then she hit him with a rock. He managed to grab it from her and he only hit her back in self-defense. The witnesses who say he hit first, they never saw how things happened. They weren't there. So let's talk about why this is taking so long. And I think there are several different reasons. One really big one is that the instructions in this case were extraordinarily complex. And I mean, really I'm talking about a team of NASA scientists could not figure out how to decide this case. I spent hours and hours trying to prepare for you a little chart so you could see it. And I don't know, this is the best that I could do. I have decades of law practice under my belt, and I still found this incredibly hard. So here is my best shot at explaining to you. Let's add this to the stage and let you see what I have worked on. So the jury is going to have 6 choices of what they can pick. They can return one of these 6 things. Number 1 would be not guilty. Okay, that's obvious, right? It's a criminal case. That's always an option. Number 2 would be guilty of attempted murder in the 2nd degree. Number 3 would be guilty of attempted manslaughter. EMED is extreme mental or emotional distress. Now, number 4, guilty of attempted assault 1st degree. Number 5, guilty of assault 2nd degree. And number 6, guilty of assault 3rd degree. So those are the choices. But getting and choosing between those 6 is really hard and really complicated. Putting all of those instructions aside, because they will piece through them, they will figure it out, and they haven't asked questions about that yet. Let's look at what the real issues are. Where is the jury struggling? And I want to take us into some clips and look at what the arguments the defense has made are and why the jury is going to have to piece through a whole lot of evidence in order to get through that very complex legal framework that they're going to have to go through. They're going to have to go step by step down it. If they move off attempted murder, they're going to have to move to attempted manslaughter, and they're going to have to work their way through those depending on what they find. So, all right, the first and most important issue, of course, is the incident itself. The only 2 people on the cliff that day were Arielle and Gerhardt. That's it. Nobody else was present. So everybody else came along or was involved at a later point. Gerhardt's son, the 2 nurses who came along, nobody saw the fight begin, except, of course, Gerhardt and Arielle. And the defense is arguing there are several reasons why you might believe Gerhardt when he says he didn't start it, that she did. And one would be that when the nurses came up and got Arielle, he didn't follow her down. He didn't run after the nurses saying, no, I'm trying to get her. I'm trying to get her. He didn't do any of that. Instead, he just let her go. And the defense says that's pretty good evidence that he wasn't trying to kill her, that he was letting her walk down the mountain because that was never his goal to kill her. And the next thing they argue is that there was a lack of real true injuries to Arielle. She had blood all over her head, but they say that's because when you cut your head, it bleeds a lot. It's not because she was seriously injured. And there were doctors who said that, who said she wasn't truly seriously injured. Another issue, I think, is that Arielle admits that she touched Gerhardt first. Both Gerhardt and Arielle say that. And I know a lot of people are, no, she didn't say that. I want to show you what she said and we'll talk about it.
To him. So he was then facing me and the cliff, and I walked up to him. And again, we were just, everything was normal. I walked up and just kind of like brushed my hands against his shoulders, like kind of like a little hug.
Okay. As you had your hands against his shoulders, where was the defendant facing?
He was facing the cliff, facing me. My back was to the cliff, and he's facing me at the cliff.
And how far behind you was the cliff?
Feet, 10 or less.
Excuse me, I couldn't hear that.
10 or less feet.
Right. So, okay, after this happens, after you get to where the defendant is on the trail, what happened next?
When I walk up to him, then he grabbed me really forcefully by my upper arms.
Okay, we're going to stop there and let me make it a little bit larger while we talk. So they don't agree on what their positions were or who tried to shove who over the edge of the cliff. They disagree about that. But Arielle does say she touched him first. Now, you just move people around a little bit. Maybe he's over by the cliff, she's on the backside, and she touches him first. He says she came up to him and while he was right by the cliff, and she touches him, she grabs him, and he believes she's going to throw him off the cliff. So they aren't completely opposed in that regard. They both agree she touched first. She says she was hugging him. Everything was totally fine. This all came out of the blue. And that gets us to our second major point that the defense has made. They have attacked Arielle's credibility. They've said, this is not someone you can trust, jury. There were only two people there, and one of those two you cannot trust. That's Arielle, not Gerhardt, but Arielle. This is the defense arguing, of course. And exhibit A to them is the way she handled and acted during the course of what she acknowledges was an emotional affair that she had while she was married to Gerhardt. And the defense says this is proof. If you needed any, jury, here's proof that she will lie. Let's go ahead and start with some clips.
Were you having any marital problems before this happened on March 24th, 2025?
Yes, we were.
What happened to start those problems?
Sure. In December, the year prior, Gerhardt had gone through he logged into my WhatsApp account and saw that I was deleting text messages between a coworker and I, and he got upset about that.
So who is Jeffrey Miller to you?
He's a coworker and a friend.
Did you ever have sex with Jeffrey Miller?
No.
In these WhatsApp messages, did you ever send or receive sexual photos with Jeffrey Miller?
No.
Did you discuss sex at all in the messages?
No.
In these messages, did you flirt with Jeffrey Miller?
Leading up.
And she said, yes, I accidentally cut that part out. But in general, her argument is, I had an emotional affair. It wasn't anything that ended up being a substantial affair, but Gerhardt just couldn't get over it. And ultimately, this is the motive that led to him attacking her on the cliff. That's the prosecution argument. That's Arielle's argument. But the defense focuses on the fact of the affair and the fact of hiding it. And not little in that, not small in that, is that she deleted what the defense claimed was thousands of text messages. So maybe they're suggesting the affair was a lot more than she let on. Maybe she was concealing information about that.
To December 2024, ma'am, prior to the discovery of your communications with Mr. Miller, you were trying to hide the extent of your relationship with Mr. Miller from your husband, correct?
That's right.
To conceal the substance of your communications and the extent of your relationship with Mr. Miller from your husband leading up to December 2024, you were purposefully deleting your messages to and from Mr. Miller on your phone, correct?
I was deleting messages on my phone. That's correct.
Yeah, so Gerhardt wouldn't see them, right?
That's right.
So she acknowledges, why was I doing it? Because I was trying to hide information I didn't want him to see. And the defense says that's a reason not to believe her. If she's somebody who will hide information from the person closest to her in the world, she'll hide information from you too, and you can't trust her. So, by the way, and I really appreciate the super chats coming in. I'll go through all of them in just a minute. I wanted to put this up. Thank you from Pascaline. She is talking about the video I did earlier today. For those of you who are wondering, what about the prosecution case? I went through in detail the 7 primary pieces of evidence that the state has used against Gerhardt. What I'm doing right now is unpacking some of the defense arguments that will be giving the jury something to think about. We know they've taken a long time. We're trying to piece together what is the reason for that and what might they be thinking about. So that's the difference. Thank you so much. I appreciate the super chat. Okay, and I'll get back to all the super chats in just a minute. Not only was Arielle deleting text messages, but she also had a special code word that she used with Jeff Miller to let him know that Gerhardt was around, and so she couldn't speak or text freely. So she would text this word, and here's
how do you say H-E-L-E-U?
HALU.
HALU. What is, in your line of work, what is HALU?
HALU is high assay low enriched uranium. It's like a range of enrichment for uranium-235 that would be used as nuclear fuel for advanced reactors.
Okay. I have no idea what you just said, but it has to do with your work, right?
Yes, sir.
Okay. And during this communications with Mr. Miller, you and Mr. Miller would use the word HALU in your personal messages to one another as code to let the other person know when your respective spouses were around, correct?
It was for Gerhardt specifically, but yes, that's correct.
It was for Gerhardt specifically, meaning you would tell Mr. Miller, I got HALU today, can't talk. And that was your way of communicating to him, hey, I'm around Gerhardt today, yes?
That's correct.
Did he have a code word for you that he would tell you when his wife was around?
Not to my knowledge.
And the defense says, look at that. When you got somebody who will go to that length to conceal things, jury, you can't trust her. So that was a key piece. There was also some communication that Jeff Miller and Arielle did over a privacy app with a pretty unusual name.
So in November of 2024, Mr. Miller sent you a link to something called HMA VPN service, total online privacy with HMA, correct?
That's correct.
And that is a website, if you look further down, apparently HMA stands for hide my ass, correct?
Correct.
www.hidemyass.com, yes?
That's correct.
And you understood that a VPN is an app that allows you to hide your internet activity from others, correct?
That's not my understanding of a VPN. This was sent to be able to watch football that was streamed locally.
Okay. VPN service, total online privacy, hide my ass. And he sent you that so you could watch football?
That's right.
In addition, the defense argued that Arielle actually, at the time of this incident, had an upcoming business trip. She did not want to leave her job. Gerhardt admitted on the stand he wanted her to leave her job. He wanted her to stop working with Jeff Miller. He wanted her to stop traveling with Jeff Miller because he felt insecure about their relationship. He felt like she should be willing to cut that off to protect their marriage. But there was an upcoming business trip plan, and according to the defense, Arielle had actually switched her hotel, so she would now be staying at the same hotel where Jeff Miller was staying.
And in fact, you had a trip planned coming up to Seattle with Mr. Miller that you ended up canceling, yes?
He would have been there. There were several people from Terra Power.
Okay, let me rephrase that. You were going to go on a work trip at which Mr. Miller was going to be at, correct?
Correct, sir.
And in fact, on that trip, you had changed your hotel to be in the same hotel as Mr. Miller, correct?
And several other Terra Power employees, yes, sir.
So Gerhardt, according to the defense, Gerhardt wasn't paranoid. He was checking her messages and being worried for a very good reason. She would lie to him, she would conceal from him, and that's someone who isn't credible. So that was a key linchpin of the defense case. They also used that to suggest that some of the evidence that she talked about may not have been real. Huge piece in Exhibit A. Can I call it that? I guess I'm talking about exhibit of exhibit. But she talked about Gerhardt having pulled out a syringe right there on the cliffside and telling her, hold still, and trying to inject her. She knocked it out of his hand, knocked it away, and that's when he picked up the rock and began to hit her. Well, that missing syringe was never found, not in his bag, not on the mountainside. She did find some in a bag he kept at home that he used to take to work, but nothing was found there on the island where they had traveled and were spending their birthday celebration days for Arielle. So the prosecution says, well, that's not the only thing missing. Another thing that's missing is Arielle's phone and her purse, which Gerhardt had. So maybe he threw everything over the cliff or hid it somewhere. But the syringes, they argue, maybe they were thrown away along with the other items. So but the defense did make, I think, a really interesting argument about this. Gerhardt had to board a plane in order to fly to Oahu in order to spend this birthday weekend with Arielle. And the fact that they had to fly to the island meant they had to go through security. Well, nobody at airport screening alerted to anything related to syringes or anything dangerous anyway. Let's add this back.
Went through the screening together, put your bags through the screening together at the same time, correct?
I would assume so, yes, sir.
And no problems getting through TSA that day, correct?
Not that I recall, sir.
So in addition to that, arguing in general that she would lie and that affected whether they could believe about anything about what she said being on the mountain, whether they could believe the syringe, the defense also argued that she made up an injury. She tried to get her local provider to write down that she had a head injury. And she told them, yeah, I did have a head injury because the hospital said I had a head injury, the one where I was treated right after this incident. But the defense pulled out those records and said, these records don't show that you had a head injury. You just wanted that on there because you thought there would be an advantage. So the next area where the defense made real attempts to persuade the jury was by arguing that there was no reason to believe Gerhardt was really planning this attack. He didn't have an intent to attack her. There just wasn't solid evidence. And one of the reasons they said that is that the timing made no sense. Arielle herself said that their relationship was doing well and was improving.
Like December was really hard. January, it seemed like things were getting a little bit easier. Things were getting a little bit better. By February, we had gone on a family vacation with our little kids and had a really fun time. And so it seemed like by February, we were starting to kind of turn a little bit of a corner.
How did your relationship with the
And this
defendant
was
progress
March.
into February?
Yeah, like I said, January, was better than December. February is better than January in terms of, stability and kind of seeming like things, being hopeful for the future. In February, we did a family vacation with our little boys and saw Gerhardt's family. And we had a really fun time. So it felt like I said, just felt hopeful for the future.
Were these WhatsApp messages an issue in your relationship at all in February?
I not that I recall, and if so, it was a small thing. Yeah.
And how did your relationship progress into March 2025?
Same again. I would have said it in early March. March was better than February. It seemed like we were both really trying. We certainly had things to work through, but it seemed like we were both putting in a lot of effort. And we had committed to kind of giving our kids 2 years of us like really working on things.
And
So the defense point is, why now? Why, when everything is going well, months have rocked along, why does he suddenly attack her on that cliffside? And if he did suddenly attack her, maybe it's because, like he said, they were having an argument. It wasn't something pre-planned. There was no long intent where he had planned this. And that feeds into their next argument, which is this trip where they were taking the hike was her idea. Not the hike necessarily, but the trip was her idea. Here's what she said about that.
this birthday trip in March, at the end of March, who planned that trip again?
Gerhardt planned the trip.
And how did the trip go before you took the hike on March 24th?
The trip was going well. We came out the day before in the morning, and we went to a spa, and we did like a long couple spa thing, a couple hours long. Did a nice lunch. We walked around and shopped and had a nice dinner. It felt, normal. We were having fun together, relaxing.
The concept of going to Oahu was something that you brought up, right? And you said, it doesn't need to be now, but I've always wanted to go there on a staycation. It doesn't need to be now. And he said, oh, let's go, right?
Sure, yes.
Okay. It's not like out of the blue he said, hey, we're going on this trip. It's going to be on Oahu. This is what's happening. You raised the concept, yes?
I raised the concept of wanting to go to Oahu at some point. Yes, sir, that's correct.
Imagine Oahu being a staycation. That sounds really fun. So why do we not all live in Hawaii? I often ask myself that. But the defense is saying, look, if this was her idea to go to Oahu, then how is this Gerhardt planning and executing this murder plot? It doesn't really seem to fit. In addition, that morning, he gave her a very sweet birthday card written out in the form of a heart and a birthday present. Again, the defense is saying this isn't some planned assault on her. There's no planned murder. This just happened. And these two hiked a lot. There's no evidence he picked this hike as a murder spot. Here's what was said on that.
The concept of going on a hike came up. That's why you brought stuff, shoes and clothes to go hiking, right?
Yes, like I said.
And in fact, hiking, it was not unusual for you guys to go on hikes. That's something you guys did from time to time, yes?
Yes, sir.
All right, we'll pull that out for just a minute so we can talk. So the defense argues, look, this isn't something that's been planned for a long time. Gerhardt didn't intend this. If something happened, it was just a fight, a scuffle suddenly happening on the cliffside. Nobody planned it. Instead, this was something they regularly did. And although there were searches in his computer that showed things like looking for the hike, there wasn't anything such as steep, dangerous hikes, places where someone could easily be murdered in Hawaii. Nothing like that. So it wasn't as obvious as you might see in some cases. So the fourth point that they made was that there was reasonable doubt in lots of different places, that the evidence, although some of it was strong, was also sometimes ambiguous. So this is the defense argument. One, of course, was that defense was about the timing, about things that were improving. I hope I didn't put this in twice.
You never saw any vials or syringes.
Okay, good. I think I just put that in twice. So let me head down here. Okay, here we go. So the witnesses who were actually the best witnesses for the state, for example, these two nurses who were hiking, they come up, they see Arielle, they see Gerhardt on top of Arielle holding a rock And one of them said that she actually witnessed Gerhardt hitting Arielle. That was actually something she saw. It's huge evidence for the prosecution. So the defense response was, okay, yeah, you saw that moment in time, but he admits that. He admits he hit her, but he says it was in self-defense, and you missed that moment in time. Here's how it came out at trial.
Correct?
No,
Well, I asked that to wrong. Did you see any vials or syringes?
no, I did not.
And ma'am, you did not see how the incident started, correct?
Correct.
You did not see who started it, correct?
Correct.
You did not see the whole incident, correct?
Yes.
One of the most important witnesses, I thought, maybe the most important, was the son of Gerhardt, his son, Emil, a teenager, now maybe 20 years old, according to Gerhardt, but a teenager at the time this happened. And during the course of the day, right after this incident with Arielle, Gerhardt called his son, called him once, talked to him, and called him back. I think it was about an hour later. In the course of that conversation, Emil, the son, says Gerhardt confessed, and says that not only did he confess, but he at no point said anything about Arielle having attacked him. Instead, he said, I tried to kill her and she was cheating on me, and I'm going to unalive myself. So it was an extremely emotional time, a conversation. You can imagine this teenage son receiving this call saying, I'm from his own father, talking about unaliving himself, trying to talk his dad out of that. He's on a completely different island. There's nothing he can do about it. So the defense argument was, okay, yeah, maybe he thinks that. We're not going to say he doesn't think that, but this is something, it's such an emotional charged conversation. Emil couldn't possibly and can't be expected to remember everything about it correctly.
Now you're hearing this, you see the blood, you see the steep cliff, he's telling you he's gonna jump, you know, and I'm sure it was a pretty emotional, upsetting call, yes?
Yes.
And it was also a little confusing to you. You're trying to kind of piece together and make sense of what happened, correct?
Yes.
Okay. And also trying to convince him not to jump, correct?
Correct.
Now, I do want to clarify, as I did in the video I dropped earlier today about the prosecution side, Emil was very strong on the concept of there was a confession. What he said was very clearly, and that he tried to kill Arielle. He said that. And so it was very strong evidence. I'm showing you how the defense tried to counter it and what their key arguments were. So the defense also talked about that missing syringe. Maybe they suggested Arielle made it up. There wasn't one found. And without that evidence, the jury shouldn't consider it. That was their argument. And additionally, there wasn't as strong digital evidence as you might expect. There was digital evidence where there were searches and things like that. It was 100% clear that Gerhardt was very upset about the emotional affair. No question there. That was very obvious. And I mean, he was searching it on New Year's Eve at 3 a.m. and he was searching it on, was it New Year's Eve? May have been Christmas Eve. He was searching it on Christmas Day, searching it around New Year's Eve. I mean, he was upset about this. But the defense argument is, so what? Wouldn't anyone be upset about that? Of course he was upset about that. Those trailed off though. And he didn't continue to keep searching that, not a lot, not repeatedly. And there was nothing in that digital trail that suggested specifically an attempt to murder or an interest in murdering her. So as far as the digital trail, the defense argued that shows he wasn't really thinking through planning on trying to murder her. So when we talk about what is taking the jury so long, I think there are several components. Number one is that extremely complicated jury instruction and jury verdict form and how much legal information gets packed into that. I think that's hard and it's dense for anyone to try to figure out. The second is the defense drew some very specific arguments. I don't know if people realized at the time kind of where they were headed with some of these, but the reason they did that was they were trying to come up with arguments that hit exactly what some of the issues the jury would have to be deciding were. And they were trying to aim them straight at that. When they aimed them at that, their hope was they would convince jurors that there was a reason why they could not find Gerhardt Konig guilty. And so that was what they were aiming for. And I've walked you through here what some of those are. There was strong evidence for the prosecution while no one else was present. There was Arielle to testify, the two nurses, there was Emile, there was the rock itself. Now that became a sort of controversial piece of evidence, but that could go either way. The rock had blood that had Arielle's DNA on it and not Gerhardt's. That would suggest she got bloodied with the rock, but not Gerhardt. But on the other hand, the other side of it also had Arielle's DNA as well as Gerhardt's. So he says, I picked it up, I hit. Okay, sure, his DNA is there. But why is her DNA on the other side of the rock? The defense says, well, the reason is because she hit him first. She grabbed the rock and hit him with it first. That's why it's there. The prosecution argued, no, it wasn't that. It was the fact that she's fighting off this attack. And so in the course of that, she touched the rock. So we will, I want to go ahead and do some questions, but we are now verdict clock 7 hours and 34 minutes. So what does this mean? Does it mean the jury is hung? Does it mean they can't make a decision? Not necessarily. It's possible, but I think they have a lot to deal with in this case. I think the evidence by the defense was aimed straight at the hard questions. And I think there were a whole lot of hard questions. And the jury verdict, the jury instructions and the verdict form, they're complex. They are really, really hard. So I feel for the jury, and I can imagine they are having a difficult time of figuring all this out. So let's go. I'm going to look through the questions. If you have a question, if you could put your question marks at the beginning of your chat, that will really help me find them in there. First, I do want to say thank you to the Farnival, who is a new member. Welcome. Thank you so much. And Michelle Mancilli, too. Thank you both for being new members. I really do appreciate that. And My Miracle Mama, I appreciate the super chat, and I'm so glad to have you here tonight. Alyssa, I'm very touched. What a nice comment. Thank you, Alyssa. And I appreciate the super chat very much. Pascaline, we talked about this earlier because I wanted you to know about my other video as well, so you can get both sides of the story and understand sort of what the issue is. But is asking, when you have a complex form like this, are you kind of inviting a hung jury? Maybe the jury will say, okay, we're not attempted murder. We're going to move to manslaughter. We're going to move to second degree assault. It is complex. It was a very difficult assignment. I think they have a lot to deal with. And so does that invite? Maybe somewhat. I think prosecutors do that both because it's the law, but also because it gives them a chance to make sure that there is a conviction of something. What exactly? Maybe a little more difficult. And like you say, maybe it does increase the chances of a hung jury. But overall, there aren't a lot of hung juries. Usually people are able to figure it out. We will see what happens here. It is a complex case. I will say that again. Thank you, Laura, for the super sticker. I appreciate that. And Rosie has been a member for a month. We'll stop there. I'll come back over here to the super chats in just a minute, but let me head over here and see if some people have put question marks at the beginning of their questions so that I can find them in the middle of the chat. When it goes kind of fast, it can be a little difficult to find. So I will just stop at the first one I find, and then I will start answering. I don't think I'm in the right spot, so hopefully. Jay Sacco wants to know whether Gerhardt could press charges against Arielle for her attack against him. I think that would be pretty difficult. It's not that he couldn't ask the prosecutor to do that, but I think it's not very likely that he would try that. If he gets out of here unscathed, unconvicted, he will absolutely, if I were if I were his lawyer, I would say, run for the hills, get out of here, have nothing to do with this ever again. Do not invite trouble. That's what I would be telling him. Oh, thank you, Valerie. I appreciate asking about my blouses. I have no idea where I got this one. I would tell you, but I don't remember. But thank you. I appreciate it. Harold wants to know, do you think Arielle is watching the trial? I certainly would be if I were Arielle. If I could stand it, I would be trying to watch the trial because she's already testified. She's off the stand. So there's no rule that says she can't. So I would think that she would probably want to do that. Although right now there's not a lot to watch other than just an empty screen and a ticker saying, yep, it's now been 7 hours, 38 minutes. So that's all there is. Elizabeth wants to know, what do you feel is the defense's strongest argument? I think their strongest argument is that no one was there at the moment this all began. And they have two wildly different descriptions of it. And there are some reasons that would support Gerhardt's argument that she might have started it, that she might have had a reason to start it. So I think that's probably where the jury will struggle if they pick some area. That's going to be at like, how did this all start and how do we know? And of course, the prosecution says we gave you plenty of information that will help you figure that out. All right, so let's see. Looking for those question marks at the beginning, and Itza asked me, did Gerhardt have his backpack with him when the police found him, or did he dispose of it with her bag? He did have a bag, and the way we know that for sure is the police officer testified about it, testified that when Gerhardt, and this was another significant issue I talked about in the morning video that you definitely are going to want to watch following this, but Gerhardt's coming out of the woods. They spot him. He's been gone for hours. And the guy says, I'm looking straight at him. And I say, stop, police. And he takes off. And so I go chasing him. And then he reaches into a bag. And so we know he had a bag with him. So the bag he had with him didn't have a syringe. And the bag didn't have Arielle's purse. It didn't have her phone, even though those were missing. Lindsay wants to know, sometimes do you believe juries take things so seriously that they lose common sense? Honestly, Lindsay, I don't think you can. I do think I think it's so important. And it's, of course, easy to say, wow, this was a terrible thing, and to jump on one side or the other. I honestly really do appreciate it when a jury takes a long time. To me, that says they took it seriously. They said, we want to get this absolutely right. So can you overthink things? Well, of course, sometimes you can, but I do think that in general, it's an admirable thing when they take a long time. So I'm always grateful when that happens. IT Can Be wants to know, who would gain financially with the life insurance? Well, the defense had a very unusual argument here, right? Always in these true crime cases, the life insurance is on the person who gets killed. That's how it is. But here, just the opposite. Gerhardt had the big life insurance policy. So if Gerhardt died, Arielle stood to gain $1.5 million in insurance. And of that, $500,000 came through, was approved the morning of their big fight. That very day. And he wrote her, hey, got that $500,000 extra in. Good news. And on the other hand, for Arielle, they only had $250,000 in insurance. If something happened to her, that's all that they would get. And they explained that the reason for that was because Arielle made less than Gerhardt did. And so they wanted to have enough to be able to pay off the house. So in order to do that, she would need $1.5 million, but he would continue earning, so they would get less on her. And that's how they came up with those numbers. Texas 2 Pug says, how would you grade each attorney on how well they tried the case? So I always try not to grade attorneys for fear that I would one day be graded myself. And who knows, fall short. But I feel like they came up with good arguments, and that is the most important thing. And also, they were really in it, and they really tried. Those are the things I look for in attorneys, not sort of perfect execution it's always fun when an attorney is a great cross-examiner. That is so fun to watch. But I think that they did a good job, and primarily because they brought out the facts that really mattered. Tammy Martin wants to know, wouldn't the Michael Jackson drug take a while to make you drowsy? He knew there were other people near the trailhead. That is true. If there were one thing to pick out of this that seems the most improbable, it would be the whole syringe thing. Since it wasn't found, I can see the jury saying, yeah, we don't buy the whole syringe thing. We don't think that really happened. It doesn't really make a lot of sense. Also, the whole thing, they're in this struggle on a cliffside, right? I mean, they are right at the edge, according to the way that they both are afraid they're going to go over. And suddenly he's like, hold still. Well, he's going to jabber with the shot. I don't know. It did seem a little odd, but that's what she says happened. So that is what the prosecution went with. Is it suspicious that Gerhardt said he turned himself in? Well, that really would be inaccurate, wouldn't it? That would be highly inaccurate. I didn't realize he had said that. That is not the way it worked. At least not the way the police officer saw it. Pray then hustle. It seems she pushed him first. Defense didn't come up until trial. So that may be, but it also may be because Gerhardt wasn't speaking or confessing or giving any information to the defense. Sorry, I said that wrong, said that backwards, to law enforcement. So it may not be that it's brand new. It just may be there was never an opportunity to say it before because he refused to talk to law enforcement, said, I want my attorney, I invoked my right to counsel, and then refused to talk. So that may be the reason for that. So it may have seemed more like a surprise, but not been a surprise in that he had never given any explanation before. Now, YRB, was it ever stated or agreed that the affair was physical? No, very much not. Everyone referred to it as an emotional affair. Gerhardt did, Arielle did, everyone did. So she stated, I think I played it tonight, that she did not have a physical affair. There wasn't one. She denied that. They never had any relations, and therefore, as far as I can tell, it was physical only. Let me head over here and see who Jadzia has been a member for 25 months. That is awesome. Thank you, Jadzia. That is forever in our membership. So thank you. And Nina asked me if I think there's going to be a hung jury. It obviously, the longer the time period, the more the chance of that. But I am going to go with a no, I don't think that. But that's maybe, call me an optimist, but I think that they will come up with an answer and figure things out. But maybe not. Maybe not. It is complicated. It could take a while, but I'm thinking they're going to come up with an answer. Why don't we ask? Y'all tell me what you think. Put that in the chat. I guess we could do a poll. I may do a poll about whether, I think I will. I think I'll go over. It'll take me just a second. Let's head over and see, because I am very curious. Oh, wait, I don't want to do that because that might take me off the verdict clock. Maybe if I do a new window, that would probably let me know that's the wrong thing. Okay, I can't. I don't think I can anyway. New window, can I? Oh, I can do it. Okay, all right. Well, let's see. And I will head in here and I'm going to ask y'all a poll because I want to know what you think. And you probably want to say anyway. All right, so let's head into here. And I am going to ask you, what do you think the jury is going to do? All right, so let's start a poll. What do you think the jury will do? There were like 3 misspellings in there, so it may take me just a minute. I hate to put that out. My grandmother would turn over. All right, turn over in her grave. Let's see. Hung jury will be an option, clearly an option. Guilty, not guilty. We could also do, let's just do not guilty because it's too, there's 6 and they only give me 4. So I'm going to start the poll with that. Guilty, not guilty, and hung jury. And we will see what you think is going to happen. All right. Thank you, Preacher Man Piper. Much appreciated. Much appreciated. Pinnacle Group wants to know, how could I think that would mean prosecuting attorneys' closing have been stronger? And I think the closings were great. I saw a whole bunch of negative comments about the defense attorneys' closing. I thought it was, yes, too long, maybe repetitive, but the arguments were very strong. I thought the prosecution was great. I thought it was fantastic. I thought they both were. And I'm not looking at it from a made me want to cry, maybe wanted to stand up and cheer. I'm looking at, how did it do in putting together, packaging the evidence so that the jury can understand it, so that they can make a good, solid determination. And to me, that's what the ultimate question is. And I thought they both were excellent in that regard. That was my opinion. But those of you who have been around know that I always say that. So, or at least most of the time. If I don't say that, just saying, damned with faint praise there. All right. And Paseline wants to know, don't you think that Arielle established a kind of psychological hold on Emile to testify against his father? And I know Paseline meant father. That is definitely one of the places where the defense was headed, was the fact that Emile now lives with Arielle and his allegiance is with her. He depends on her in many ways. He may be a young adult, but he has not been to college. He is working, he said. And so he needs her. He needs to live there. He depends on her. He calls her parents his grandparents, and he wants to stay in Hawaii. He has a friend group here. So yes, he's biased and he needs her. So of course he would take her side. That was one of the things they suggested. By contrast, he hasn't spoken to his dad in a year. And that has been true. He hasn't spoken to him since those 2 phone calls. On the other hand, you could sure see where he would be mighty upset about those 2 phone calls. I mean, that a dad would do that is just brutal. And Gerhardt explained how sorry he was about that, how he regrets it now, but that what he wanted to do was say goodbye to his son. So there you have it. That was the explanation. Brenda wants to know, do you think the ages of the attorneys have a lot to do with the questions they ask and the way they handled the case? You know, it's interesting that you say that, Brenda. Maybe not so much just age, but there was a whole set of arguments that I was kind of puzzled by. Maybe it is age. I thought maybe it was region of the country or something, but the arguments about him being really upset about this emotional affair and wanting to oversee her, make sure that she wasn't with this guy, make sure she didn't go on trips alone with him, even want her to quit her job. Those seem to me arguments that in my region of the country would not be shocking or offensive, but the prosecution hit those arguments as really offensive. Like, who would do that? And I was intrigued by that. I thought, well, maybe it's regional, but that may be what you mean about it. I don't know if it was age. I just was surprised that the prosecution seemed to have a view of those questions in a way that I wasn't assuming people would be thinking. I was really surprised by that. Thank you, KTB. Much appreciated. I'm going to head back over and answer some questions with question marks at the beginning. Why didn't they focus on why did Gerhardt run and hide? Asked Anna Kay. They did talk about it. It was definitely mentioned. And the argument that the prosecution made was, look, you don't run and hide unless you got something to run and hide from. And look what Arielle did. She walked down the mountain. She went to the hospital. If what had happened up there was truly that Gerhardt got attacked by his wife, Arielle, and he headed down the mountain because he wanted to find then wouldn't he have headed down the mountain to tell police, I was attacked by my wife up there? It was terrible. But instead, he spent hours on the mountain walking around and then ran from the police. So that was definitely something that they were talking about and that they believed, prosecution did, showed that he was guilty. That was how they argued it. Miku Chan is asking, if it's a hung jury, is that more of an advantage for the defense or prosecution? So it's honestly bitter for both sides because it makes things difficult. Now, overall, it's better for the defense. And I say that because almost always the prosecution wins these cases. We've looked at the stats before here on the channel, and it's really strong. Almost always it's the defense losing and the prosecution wins. So anything other than a life in prison kind of sentence is good. Anything other than with no conviction is good. But the prosecutor can just retry the case. So it doesn't end things for the defendant, and they can retry it again and again and again. Sometimes I think a defendant hopes, and I know Karen Reed talked about this, well, maybe there would be a reason not to retry this. It's expensive and it didn't win. You can't persuade a jury. Let's just walk away from this. It's unusual for the prosecution to do that in a serious case, though, and particularly one with a national profile. So probably not. So it would be a semi-win for the defense, but not a really good, happy win. Just we didn't lose yet kind of a win. All right. Can you recall any recent trials, asked Ringa, where it took this long when it was considered a slam dunk by many? So not usually. I think the cases we've covered here on the channel have always shocked me by how fast the jury comes back. I'm each and every time I'm thinking, this is a hard case. They're going to really think about it. Then bam, they come back. So I don't think I can remember anything else. But I didn't think it was a slam dunk. I thought both sides were bringing good, powerful arguments. I thought the prosecution had, and you can go through my video from earlier today and hear those arguments, the ones I thought were the strongest. And then tonight we've talked about some of the counters that the defense had that may be causing the jury to really struggle with this. Okay, Elizabeth asked, what do you think is the defense's strongest? Making me pick. Well, as far as the defense, I think their strongest argument is that Arielle had some incentive to lie, maybe even incentive to want him unalived. I don't think that was fully developed, anything like that, but I think that was their strongest argument, in addition to the fact that, which I think I'm now giving a second. I think you asked me that exact question earlier, and I gave a different answer. So that will just go to show you, I think they were all interesting, strong arguments. So there you have it. Can't pick just one, and I've now proven it. Secret twist. Couldn't her DNA have been transferred to the rock from him? Well, there is such a thing as transfer DNA. And one of the defense arguments was you can't tell where any of this came from. But the DNA on the blood, that was DNA in the blood. Blood DNA was hers. So that was clearly hers. And then there were two DNA types, two people's DNA on the other side of the rock as well. All right. Hawaii Wealth Partners asked, can the jury ask questions? I thought I heard the judge say they can't. I did not hear any questions during the part I was listening to. Some courts allow it and some don't. It's I had not ever experienced it until last few years. It's really interesting. It gives you some clues as to where the jury is headed, but I didn't hear any. So maybe I missed one, but I wouldn't be surprised if the rule was no. That's our rule here. I am not from Texas, Ari. Does anyone, Pray Then Hustle asked, does anyone know if he said the self-defense thing before taking the stand? That was my first time hearing it. I think that he had not, but as I said, that might just be because there hadn't been an opportunity, a place where he would have done that because he wasn't talking to law enforcement, which he had the right not to do. All right. Mary wants to know, was there a mistress involved? Not that I'm aware of. I didn't hear any argument about that. I didn't hear anybody suggest that. As far as I know, no, there wasn't anything like that in the case. It was one direction, and it wasn't a physical affair. It was an emotional affair by Arielle, not by Gerhardt. So Drew asks, how long do they usually wait for a hung trial? So what will happen if there is a hung jury is there will be a long delay. It'll go on for a while. And eventually the jury will come back. Rarely does the judge have to prompt this, but sometimes the judge might say, you know, well, what do you think? But usually the judge does nothing. And eventually the jury will come back and say, we can't decide. And the judge will say, well, they'll go through a series of kind of decision making. The judge may just say, keep going and nothing else. The judge also might give a dynamite instruction, it's called, that is designed to make the jury make up its mind, where he says to the jury, look, don't assume that there is some magical jury out there that will know how to solve this case when you don't. You are the magical jury. And so you need to all talk and figure this out. Open your mind, listen to each other, and figure this out. And so that may be, and if he gives a dynamite charge and then they still come back and say, we can't decide, that's usually when the hung jury is declared. As far as I'm aware, we haven't reached any of those touchstones yet. The jury is just plain deliberating, and we're waiting. And we are presently at 7 hours and 58 minutes. So that's where we are presently. I appreciate Court TV's clock. That is really helpful. All right, let me head over here and answer some more questions over here. All right, let's see. Oh, Eagle Wings is a new member. Thank you. Thank you for joining. And I'm looking for question marks at the beginning. Anna K, if G is acquitted, Gerhardt, I can't imagine Arielle and the sons would want to ever see him. How is that dealt with at release? Well, Arielle might apply for a protective order, and maybe a court would grant that to her. Maybe she would say, I want that. On the other hand, Emil, the son, could apply for a protective order. But since there was no direct threat to him, I don't know what the court would do with that. I think the more likely thing is that over the years, Gerhardt would try to reach out to his son and try to patch things up. And I hope, I'm a sentimentalist, but my hope would be that they would be able to patch that up. Not because Gerhardt is perfect, but because, I don't know, I just think that's a good thing when fathers and sons talk and are, you know, not bitter to one another. I would like to see that. But like I say, idealist dreamer right there. All right. North Wildlings asked me, why were they allowed to accuse him of using a syringe if there was no evidence of it? The evidence of it was that Arielle said he had one, and she knocked it out of his hand. And secondly, it was feasible because he was an anesthesiologist, and back on the island where they lived, in the closet, in the house, was a bag that had such syringes. So it's possible. But the evidence was not a physical syringe that was found, because there wasn't a physical syringe that was found. All right, I'm going to head over and see what y'all did with the poll. And let's see, I haven't ended it, have I? No. If you have a vote, and I can see we're fragmenting a little bit on this, although it's still pretty strong. If you haven't voted, this is your chance. Head over to the poll and vote. And I'm going to click it off in just a second. But this last call on the vote. And what you're voting on is what you think the jury will do. So I will give that one more minute, but a fair warning, we're about to call that one. Prosecutions, I'm not doing any more best points because I believe I've already contradicted myself on that. I will do prosecution's best points. Number one to me was Emil, the testimony of the son. And number two was the testimony of the nurse who came up and saw Gerhardt hitting Arielle with a rock, because they supported what Arielle was saying. So that's why I thought those were the most important. Pat Speaks wants to know who did the best closing argument. I liked them both. You know, I always say that. So there you have it. Anna, do you think Arielle was having an emotional affair? She said so. So I'm just going to go with yes, because she admitted that. I'm going to say yes. Now, if I think what you're asking me is, do you think it was truly emotional versus physical? I'm always a little skeptical, but there was no evidence to the contrary, and Gerhardt never said anything to the contrary. All right. Lindsay wants to know, what's your opinion of the side-by-side comparison of their faces after the incident? I thought it was really important. I talked about that in the morning's video too, because she had a lot of blood He had a little bit of blood on the ear, and the contrast between those suggested she was attacked a lot more. Now, the argument against it by the defense was, look, this was a cut right on the head. They always bleed more. There's no reason to believe this shows us or proves anything about who attacked first. All right, I'm ending the poll, and I'm going to tell you how you voted as soon as it pops up for me. Here we go. Okay, this is your vote. 77% of you believe that the jury will ultimately find Gerhardt Konig guilty. 15% of you think there will be a hung jury, and only 8% of you think there will be a not guilty. I, as usual, will not vote. I never commit myself, and certainly not in advance. I try really hard not to, so I can be as neutral as possible, because my goal is to let you know what the facts are, what the case was about, not to tell you what my opinion is. Occasionally I do, but generally speaking, I hold back. All right. Lynn asked me, could he be tried for first-degree murder later on if he's acquitted of the current charges now? I believe, Lynn, and I don't practice in Hawaii, but I think first-degree murder is not a separate level. I think it's a separate definition. And what I mean by that is that's like you kill a police officer or you kill a child or something specific. It's not something that's related to the way the murder was performed. But I'm not sure about that. I don't have a definite answer on that. But all that to say, I don't think he could be tried on that again, even under Hawaii law. But he is being tried by the state. Could the federal government try him? Maybe. But if he is found not guilty, I would be very surprised if there is ever any additional charge brought about this. I don't see how they get any more evidence to do it. I mean, what would be the extra evidence? They have the rock. They have Arielle. There's still not ever going to be any third person who was sitting there at the time that they got into this fight. So I think it would be hard. All right. Mike asking me, could the wife get charged for attempting to manipulate evidence, like the doctor phone call issue? You know, that is probably something that will come up in the civil case related to the divorce and the civil case related to custody issues. I don't believe there would ever be a criminal charge based on that, but it may be something that a judge has to assess that everybody tries to argue over in that civil side. All right, we'll do a couple more questions. And then we will, I don't see any sign that the jury has come back. We've now passed the 8-hour mark, 8 hour and 5 minutes. So the jury has been out a substantial amount of time, and we will see whether they come up with an answer. Busy Bee wants to know, do you think Gerhardt's face could be bruised or dirty by the police takedown? I think that they tried to address that in the testimony. So, for example, the defense lawyer asked the police officer, did you tell us, you're saying to the jury that you hit Gerhardt as you were taking him in custody, but where did you hit him? And he said on big muscle groups like arms, legs, but not on his head, not on his face. So the injury to his ear couldn't have come from the police. That was the argument being made by the defense. Now, he had, you were right, he had some like debris on him, and I can see that having happened when he was thrown to the ground by the police officer. So that's possible there. But on the other hand, that doesn't really indicate injury, not true injury. All right. So I see people making comments about the judge. He was good. He reminded me of I'll have to think of it. A judge in a movie. He reminds me of the My Cousin Vinny judge a little bit. I thought, anyway, my favorite legal movie of all time. All right, looking for question marks at the beginning. Here we go from Donna. Why would Gerhardt flee the scene and flee police if he was the victim of the attack? You are asking the exact question asked by the prosecution, and they don't think there would be any reason for that. They say that wouldn't have happened. Confused Bulldog asks, if Konig is acquitted or convicted of a lesser crime, what civil liability does he have? Well, that is a different standard. And so there still could be a suit where Arielle sues him and says, you harmed me and here are my medical bills and here are the injuries I incurred. But obviously there's no criminal liability. He doesn't go to jail for that. So could that happen? More likely, all of this will also play out in the civil case, which is still pending. They are not yet divorced, even though they are in the process of a divorce, as I understand it. Kate Coco asks, what's the difference between intent to kill and premeditation? Does the attempted second-degree murder require intent to kill? So these are super complex. There were the attempted murder, second degree, fed into attempted manslaughter. And the difference between the two was extreme mental or emotional distress. And that's how it fed downward. And then you feed down to assault in the first degree, which is trying to seriously injure as opposed to murder someone. You then get to assault in the second degree, which is substantial bodily injury or intentional or knowing use of a dangerous instrument. And then you move to assault in the third degree, which is negligent use of the instrument, or not just substantial bodily injury, just plain old bodily injury. So that's kind of the flow of it. But one of the things I think could easily be holding the jury up is how very, very dense it is legally, how incredibly difficult it is. All right. So, and you might go back to the beginning because we talked about that at the beginning, and you'll be interested to hear a little bit more about that, I'm sure. So I'm not predicting the verdict, but good try. Thank you. Krista asking me, were you surprised the state didn't suggest some marks on his cheeks were from being apprehended by the police? I think they couldn't, because the defense sort of headed that off by asking the police officer, did you hit him in the face? And he said no. So Susan asking, do you think Gerhardt made those life insurance policies as a setup? I don't think so. I don't think he could have really done that, because if the prosecution theory is right, his plan was to murder her that day. And that the fact that the policy came through that morning just was happenstance. He couldn't have created that. He couldn't have timed it exactly right. So I would say no. I would say that just happened. All right. And Art Girl, thank you. Much appreciated. All right. Well, I see that we do not have a verdict yet. We are at 8 hours, 9 minutes, and 58 seconds and counting on the court TV clock. So it is officially exceeding 8 hours that the jury is deliberating. I don't blame them. Like I told you at the beginning, with that verdict form, with all of the charges, with the legal stuff, it's hard. But I do think that if the issue was a lack of understanding of how to figure out the charges, it would seem to me they would be sending out some questions to the judge. And maybe they are, and we aren't being told. That's always possible. It could be done back in chambers. But there's nothing that we've seen that suggests the jury is saying, I don't understand this or that. Even the fact that it's taking this long suggests maybe they didn't stop at attempted murder. Maybe they kept going. Either they didn't agree on attempted murder or didn't agree on self-defense, because those were the first questions, or they had some questions about, they agreed on those. In other words, it wasn't self-defense and it wasn't aggravated murder attempted murder. And so they then started having to deal with all of the other issues. And all of those, of course, are very complex. I would say this does indicate there must be substantial discussion among the jury about how they should go forward and what it means. I don't see there's any way we could not believe that they're having some real discussions about how to handle the case. But that doesn't mean they won't come up with an answer. They haven't in any way suggested to us that they are at an impasse, that they can't resolve it. So for now, I would say it's likely. I'm still holding out that it's likely that they will actually resolve the case. Well, you need to, if you haven't hit the like button, here we are, an hour in. Please hit the like button. I don't know how I managed to forget that for so long. But I do want to say a shout out to the first 5 in our chat tonight. We have Betsy Sue, Pascaline, Shiro Sheena, Robert Hopkins, and Laura Liz. I, as always, want to thank our mods, Marlon and Mama Pinks. We are going to keep watching this case very closely. As soon as there's a verdict, I will be back to break it all down for you, what happened, And obviously, if we get any word from the jurors, that's always super interesting. But in the meantime, if you haven't already, be sure to go watch the video from earlier today where I break down what the prosecution's key arguments were, so you can get the full picture of what the jury is trying to figure out, what they're wrestling with. So I will see you in the next video. Please do hit like, subscribe so you can come back for more. And we look forward to seeing you in the next video.